we've got three key areas that we're looking at today. And I think one of my biggest challenges was not what to include, but what not to include, because there is so much, and I'm sure many of you have been on a customer service course before. Could we have some thumbs up for those that have actually attended some form of customer service training in the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years? Anybody attended? Sarah has. Martin? Yes, no? No? Flora? No? Okay. I don't think customer service has changed, particularly in terms of what we need to do, but I think our customers' expectations of it has changed. And that's what I wanted to try and involve in today's conversation because of COVID and all the other implications of that. So a little bit about how we build our confidence around that. And this may be something that you are thinking about on your own behalf, but also on behalf of your colleagues that you are managing or role modeling. That positive experience and how we are thinking about that as we reopen, or one of the delegates was saying that part of the exhibition is closed at the moment because of ventilation, and how do we manage that situation where people might have expectations that they can visit the whole collection. And a lot of this revolves around our communication skills, but at a higher level. We can all communicate, but boy, oh boy, they have to be at a higher level, an enhanced level. So those are our three key areas today. And time frame, we will be skidding into 11:30, but I will stay online for anyone who has any particular questions that perhaps are a little bit off menu, or I can let you have my email contact details if you want to discuss it privately. And what we hope to achieve today is make sure that we are helping you to anticipate those needs and requirements of your visitors, because they may be different. So what are we doing to be proactive? Skills and tips to create that positive impression. You know, how can we acquire those ideas? And as I say, to develop some enhanced communication skills. So the current situation, well, we've got to start thinking about what we can do. I went to an event last evening. It was the first time I'd been to an event in over 6 months. And it was an event that I can't give too much away, but it's about changing our frame and thinking about what we can do, rather than regrettably over the last 6 months thinking about what we can't. And that was needed, but if our businesses and our organisations are going to survive, our museums and galleries are going to survive and appeal to our clients, we now need to change our language and think about what we can do. And I hope that's the key theme of today's session. Here's some things you can think about and perhaps adopt into your own organisation. I think it's a really good place to start in terms of what is a customer, and think about what is a customer. And I asked as part of the pre-course activities 4 questions, and one of them was, you as a customer having a great experience and a great time. And I think we need to have that in our mind as to what constituted a great time. So as a working definition, because it's something that is evolving, I think this is really powerful. It's someone who needs or wants a product, procedure or service. Has anyone got any questions about that before we go any further? Any thoughts, any thumbs up, any questions? Okay. Because your product might be different. So I found this wonderful photograph of some artifacts that might be on display. They may not, in the current circumstances, be different, but some of our procedures definitely are. Social distancing, when or if do we wear a mask? Is it cash only? Is it card only? What are those procedures that you've always had in terms of membership, fees, etc., but what are different now? And then the service, the people that connect it all up together. And it's really crucial that we think about that in those 3 different elements. And in terms of needs, these are the essential bits. And we may not think of these particularly because we think, oh, it's just essential. But one of the essentials that's changed is how to feel safe. How many of you have been on an aeroplane in the last year? Just thumbs up. Most people have been on an airplane. Yeah. And when the plane is being pushed back, what are the stewards doing? What are they talking about? As the plane is pushed back, before it takes off, what are they talking about? Celia, what are they talking about when they're being pushed back?
Safety.
Safety. Do you pay attention?
I try to.
Yep. But we have lots of distractions. We're probably already into our book or our Hello magazine. We're already thinking about what we're going to have for lunch, whether we're going to land on time. We're aware of it in our peripherals, but it's not perhaps taking our focus of attention. I would say that that has changed significantly in the last 6 months. Our need to feel safe has become sharply focused, and your visitors will have a sharp focus on that. They might not have thought about the last time they went to the cinema, sitting in that darkened room, where is the nearest fire escape? Oh, that all the seats are occupied. We now will. We've got a very different focus. And so our focus as client providers, service providers, we need to think about those essentials and make sure our processes and procedures are very clear. And then we can get to the wants, the extra bits on top. And we've always known that. I just think those needs are in sharper focus at the moment. That security, that need to feel safe, less so than whether they've got brown or white bread in the restaurant and whether the coffee's a cappuccino or a flat white. I think another element we need to think about is the idea that customers come in two groups. Can someone tell me, please, and I'll ask Sarah to manage this if you would, what the difference is between an internal and an external customer?
Has anybody got any thoughts on that?
Just gonna have a slug of water.
It's always a tricky one, I think, because we're so outward facing as a sector, we very often don't think about our internal customers as well as our external customers, because most of us probably have a really good idea of who our external customers are, because we all do our our surveys once in a while, we take postcodes and things, but does anybody have any examples of internal customers?
I've always been told that internal customers are your employees or anyone that is helping you provide the service to your external customer.
That's it. That's a really good way of looking at it. Thank you, Celia. So there's all sorts of language around who those internal, we might call them staff, we might call them colleagues, they're the workforce, they're a team member. If you're working for John Lewis, you might be referred to as a partner, the management, and there's lots of other language. And as you say, we are working for the organisation. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that our staff, our colleagues have needs and wants too. They too need to feel safe. And whilst I understand the bias of our discussion today is about the external, whatever you call whether they're members, diners, visitors, suppliers, if we are not thinking about the needs and wants, the products, procedures and services for our internal customers, they may not have the level of confidence and comfort to provide the service that we expect to our external, because they too are feeling unsure. Having recently worked for a major visitor attraction in central London that were preparing to reopen, they have excellent customer service and have won many awards. However, they wanted to give their staff a little bit of an opportunity to explore how they were feeling, their levels of confidence, what else might they need to think about, so that they felt reassured that they were being thought of too in terms of their needs and wants. So I felt it was appropriate that we brought in that conversation, because if they do not feel safe, how are they, however good their communication skills are going to be, help the visitors and suppliers and guests feel safe?
Jo, we've just had a really good question from Flora about this. She asks, do you think customers have a heightened sense of safety at the moment, overall, or just because of COVID?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's a combination of the two. So going to the event last night, I was quite surprised that we weren't expected to wear face masks. However, there was plenty of space, consideration of being given to keeping us spaced out. So there wasn't one presentation screen, there was 4. Someone had thought about social distancing without making it formal. But you could see people just, whereas you'd normally find everyone in one corner where the booze was, everyone was spread out. And I do think it heightens other people's awareness about what other safety features are in your building. Are you managing all the other safety procedures? If there is a lost child, what is your lost child policy, and is that different because of COVID? So I think where all organisations, I hope, I make a huge assumption here, have done risk assessments. Have you revisited those risk assessments because another risk factor might be COVID? So I think it is prompting a revisit to all of those safety issues. Flora, does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, no, that's great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions at this point? Okay, good. So I wanted to also then think, right, our customers and visitors, who were they? So pre-COVID, this was probably what your list looked like. If you did some group dynamics on who was visiting your museum and gallery, you would, you might materially have the data through your till points, or you might have anecdotally a feeling of the international tourists, domestic tourists, groups of 10 or more. They're coming to see something specific in your collections. You've got a special interest group, school groups, extended families. You might even have university students doing research around their thesis. That was just some of the definitions we might have. Post-COVID, I think they're very, very different. The now, the potential that we might be appealing to, especially given quarantine restrictions and the fact that they are changing almost on a daily basis, does it more look like this? Local tourists that you are attracting that didn't know you existed. Local residents that haven't visited you for years. You've always known you were there, but actually you're on the doorstep. And as we all know, when something's on our doorstep, we don't visit it. Families, small groups, couples, etc. The international tourists will come back. However, having just been to Spain on a family matter and having to quarantine for 14 days when I got back, that was okay. I'd factored that in. I think we have people that still haven't factored that in. So international visitors coming in, factoring in the fact that they might have to quarantine, may mean that we don't see international tourists maybe until next summer. So how are we adapting our procedures, our processes, our knowledge, our collections to be more around a local tourist flavour, if that indeed is useful? Local residents are making sure they revisit because they perhaps haven't for a while. And it's back to how do we make sure that they benefit from customer service, which was one of the other questions in your pre-course. How will your visitors benefit from excellent customer service? What are they going to get out of it? So perhaps let's open that question up to the floor. What are the benefits to your visitors for excellent customer service?
Anyone got any good examples they'd like to share of really good customer service? No feeling brave?
What's your thoughts? I mean, what did you think about when you saw that question on the pre-course activity sheet?
Sorry, shall I go?
Miss Griffin, sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
Pledgy.
I guess if they're going to benefit at a basic level from just having a better experience, a better day.
Yes.
We had one lady who was saying that she chose us as her first visit out since March. She'd been shielding quite carefully and she was very cautious about coming, and she fed back afterwards that kind of the experience meant she felt more confident about going out and she would return to us because she'd had such a good time. And I suppose that's the benefit of having receiving good customer service, receiving good visitor experiences. You're going to enjoy yourself and you're going to want to come back more because you're going to trust that place more.
And I think that's it, Claire, isn't it? It's that
That's
trust,
really
it's
good.
that reassurance, that feeling that not only did I get the product I was expecting, but actually I felt reassured that the procedures were self-evident. There's a facility I use on a fairly regular basis, and in the 5 years since they refurbished the toilet, this is a public car park, in the 5 years since they've had their toilets refurbished, they haven't once had soap. Not once. So you've got this wonderful brand new toilet in a public car park, and the only time they ever had soap was a bar of soap in the soap dispenser, so you still couldn't get access to it. So it doesn't exactly reassure you in terms of their understanding of how to wash your hands properly. So going back to Flora's point about that feeling of safety, that reassurance, that trust, whereas before it might have been very black and white, that fact can be trusted. Actually, it's a little bit more than that now. It's that emotional trust rather than the practical trust. Sorry, Sarah, was there something else you were going to add in there? I could hear some voices in the background.
I was just going to say that you always remember the bad customer service or the bad management of expectations, don't you? It always sticks in the back of your mind. And the good ones you kind of gloss over and you just think, oh, that's just a nice place I like to go. And you kind of don't necessarily put the two together, but you always remember a bad one.
Yeah. And I think it's worth remembering that safety is a need, and it is unlikely you'll be thanked for meeting a need. You'll be criticised if you don't. And that's the tough love of this point. And if anyone wants to do some further research on that, it comes under Hertzberg, where he talks about hygiene factors and motivation factors. And you know, we're not motivated by something that is clean, we're demotivated when it isn't. And so you can really make an impact for your customer service when we go back to a few basics and make sure that that trust is reinstated, that reassurance, because your local tourist, your local residents may be exploring your facility, as Claire was saying, as the first adventure in 6 months. So it's a powerful thing. So in thinking about your level of confidence, which is one of the key elements of today, how are you feeling personally? Are you feeling invincible? You know, 10 out of 10, nothing can get you down. You're ready to go. You've ironed your uniform. Your name badge is ready and polished. Everything's great. Good, good, good. Are you okay? Steady? Yeah, it's okay. I'm managing. So you're a 5 out of 10. Or are you fair to middling and actually you'd rather stay in bed with the duvet right up to your nose because going outside your front door is a scary prospect? I'd be keen to know, maybe put your hands up, what score you would give your level of confidence. 8s, 10s, 3s, 5s. Put your hands up, show us. Oh, we've got an 8, thank you. What else have we got? Oh, we've got a 9. Oh, sorry. Oh, we've got a 7. Martin, what would your score be? Oh, 7. Brilliant. 7 or 8. Okay, good. Lovely. There was another 6 down there. Great. What about your staff? Where do you think they're at? Same level of confidence as yourself? Oh, we've got some 9s. Good. Because whilst we're talking about our visitors' level of confidence, lovely, thank you, we've also got to think about our staff's level of confidence. And whilst this session today is not going to make all of you 10 out of 10, hopefully by 11:30 you're thinking, yeah, I probably thought I was a 7, I'm now an 8, or I thought I might have been a 5, I'm now a 6. It's thinking about what can we do for ourselves and our colleagues to raise their confidence level, even if it's just by 1. Because it may well be a while before we're all feeling 9s and 10s out of 10. Because we're still concerned about, to a greater or lesser degree, about the unknown. So just a quick model that I think is worth just exploring. Needn't worry too much about the turquoise language, but I wanted to make sure you understood why I, as a trainer facilitator, cannot give you a bucket load of confidence, because actually we've got to rewind it a little bit back to the beginning. If you think about yourself or your colleagues as new recruits, new job roles, promotions, or in this instance, is it about returning to work after a period of being on furlough, or the business being closed, or summer closure or stuff like that? And you're in your role because of level of competence and capability, the things you are able to do. That's how you've been recruited. You are able to use IT, you are able to make a bed, you are able to curate your competencies. And over a period of time where that is invested in and developed and supported, you become more credible and comfortable. So for instance, if I've worked in a gallery before and I come and join the Reading Museum, I still don't know your artifacts. I don't know yet where they are located. So I may not feel particularly credible. Still got all that competence and knowledge to draw on. But if someone asks me an overly challenging comment, do I feel particularly comfortable in answering? Possibly not. I need a little bit of time and support, coaching, feedback. What are your internal policies to help me feel credible and comfortable? Then over another period of time, my confidence will come back or will flourish, feeling able to make decisions for myself without constantly referring to material or colleagues. So I think whilst this model is directed at your colleagues, I think it's also directed at your customers too. Their level of confidence, if they've regularly been somewhere, they'll know the way it's laid out. They'll know where everything is. They'll feel comfortable. Their level of confidence may not come back for a while yet. So I think it's worth remembering, and this may also reassure yourselves, if you're not feeling as confident as you thought you might do, this might be why. That actually you're going back a step to thinking, actually, I'm not feeling very comfortable at the moment. My credibility is intact. I know what I have to do. I've got lots of competence and lots of capability. And again, it comes back to this matter of internal customers. How do we ensure they are feeling comfortable when they come back to the workplace? They may have been working from home, but they're now back in the public arena. How do we ensure they feel comfortable? How do we ensure our visitors feel comfortable? Wonderful. So, expectations. Strong belief that something will happen. Used to be typically websites and all that information coming from websites. Word of mouth, brochures, advertising, previous visits. Lovely. All very straightforward. But we've now got this matter of present and changing expectations that we need to keep an eye on. As I say, just as a summary, that need to feel safe. Government's briefings. Is Portugal in or out of the travel bridge? Do I or don't I have to quarantine for 14 days? We need to keep up to date, and we need to reassure our staff that they're kept up to date so that they are feeling informed so that we can aid that level of comfort. But we need to make sure we're still clear on value for money. So I'm just going to give you a moment to think about what for you is the definition of value for money. So what is the definition of value for money?
I think this was quite a tricky one to answer, especially for those sites that have free entry, because traditionally it would be your offer and your safety balanced against your entry costs.
Mm-hmm.
But for those museums that either have free entry or entry by donation, what are your thoughts on this one?
Anyone like to comment on that before I answer? Anyone have Martin, what would you add in?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we're a free entry museum, but that there's still a cost entailed in the fact that they have to put the money for public transports. They have to maybe make a sandwich or buy a coffee and tea when they're at the place.
That's it.
So I think it's changed a little bit in terms of beforehand it was bang for buck. What they're looking for, that we've had from our feedback, is back to your earlier point, is actually what their value for money is, that they're in a safe, secure environment out of the house.
Yeah.
With interaction, but interaction that's either with physical objects and or crafts or even other individuals and families, but in a safe way. And I think that's what people are looking for. And actually we found perhaps previously where people want, it's about time as well. If they can have 5 hours for this amount of money or this amount of effort, but actually people seem to be wanting a kind of short, sharp in and then out again. And that's what they're considering, in terms of their benefits and value.
I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that Martin said. Bang for the buck. Yeah. But how do they know how big a bang they're going to get in the first place? This is where our understanding of, I made a commitment to come to your museum because you said you had this artifact available. So as Martin said, that's now cost me petrol, time to get there. You've made promises. Hence, what did we promise? Because on that basis, I made the decision to visit you. So even if you think it's a bargain, there's lots of sales on at the moment, and we're very, very tempted to buy something because we think we're getting more bang for the buck, because something is £3 instead of £12, or £30 instead of £50. But when the item arrives and it fails, it doesn't matter how much we paid for it, whether we paid £3 or 50 quid, we have not got what the issuer, supplier promised. So we need to make sure we are very clear what we have promised. So if part of your collection is not available, how do I know that before I arrive? If some of it's been adapted, sorry Martin, I will come back. If some of it's been adapted to suit social distancing and so forth, how have we ensured that what we've promised is kept up to date? Sorry Martin, were you going to come back on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because that's something that we identified as problematic at the beginning, because as well as kind of trying to stay away from inside, we're actually refurbing our galleries at the moment. So even if we wanted to, those collections aren't there. As part of our trying to make people feel comfortable, we put all our risk assessments, we put down what to expect when you got there.
Excellent, that's it.
And we put down, exactly what was going to happen, and we put it in various levels. So we put a basic outline, and then for people who are more concerned, there was the nth degree detail.
Yeah. It's a bit like wearing face masks. If I know before I attend your museum or gallery I have to wear one, I will bring it with me. If I don't want to wear one, potentially I won't come, but at least I'm clear. If I don't know when I arrive and I'm now not allowed entry, or I've got to buy one from you for £5, however well-meaning that is, I'm now ticked off because you didn't tell me in advance what I needed to do. And I think Martin also mentions another point, because I think if you are a free-to-enter collection, there is also that value for time. Claire from the Seaside Museum was highlighting some of the key points in that collection. If I've looked on your website and seen that you particularly have a widget from Wonky Donks, and I'm here to see the widget from Wonky Donks and it's not available, I've now wasted my time. And it won't matter to me what else is in the collection, the fact that you've got the bouncing bomb, which personally my ears pricked up and thought, oh my goodness, how did I not know that? I need to come and see, because The Dam Busters is one of my favourite movies. If that's then not available, it doesn't matter that I didn't pay to get in. What you promised was you had a prototype of the bouncing bomb, and I can't see it. So think about what your websites are promising, and is that still true? And as you're saying, Martin, have you got areas closed for refurbishment or not accessible under current circumstances? Make sure your promises are kept up to date, and make sure the staff know, so that our visitors feel that their expectations are met, therefore ticking a box of value for money, and they can experience your attraction for the time that is appropriate, 30 minutes, 6 hours, whatever, and they feel their feeling of time is well spent, because those expectations are still enduring. They haven't changed at all.
I have a quick question, Jo, from Flora. It's actually slightly tangential to this subject. She was asking about what we were talking about before in terms of building confidence, and she raised a good point about complacency in the visitor and how that can build confidence, whereas that may not be the best thing that we want to encourage, but sometimes people feel complacent and they feel confident and they go out without their face mask, and then they could be in for a rough ride later on.
Okay.
And she was just asking about that subject. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Okay, there's a couple of directions we can go with this. One thought to bear in mind, and this is as useful for ourselves and our colleagues as well as our customers, our external customers, to learn something brand new as a new habit, a new skill. They estimate can take between 7 to 10 days for it to become a muscle memory or a brain memory. So if you haven't ever learnt how to play the recorder and you pick it up for the first time, the way your hands go, it takes 7 to 10 days to remember that. However, just as an example, when I picked up the recorder the first time, my hands went the wrong way round. If I am now trained to change that to a new habit, they estimate with reassurance, feedback and coaching, 10 weeks to change a habit, 7 to 10 weeks. So have I ever changed my hands on playing a recorder? No. But that's where habits, or what we might perceive as bad habits, may take a while to bed in. So the new habit of wearing a face mask has not been established yet. It is not in our cultural norm. And when it was first suggested, it wasn't expected in all circumstances. So it didn't become a new habit. It was, should I, shouldn't I? How do I feel? Comfort. So I'm not sure. I understand your thought that it's complacency. I just think more positively. This is a new habit that not everybody has accommodated yet. And what can we do as an organisation to remind them that positive language again, which is going to come up in our communication stuff. Please may I remind you, you are expected to wear a face mask in our gallery. And that may be the language we need to use across all our collateral. Please may I remind you that you are expected to, and then maintain social distancing, wear a face covering, blah, 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 to reinforce the new habits, because they are not a consistent at the moment, which is why they haven't become a consistent habit. Having been in Spain, it absolutely is a consistent habit. So there is no complacency, because that doesn't even enter, it's not even in their psyche. You wear a face mask if you are in public, end of. So as you leave the house, you put a face mask on, you might take it off if you're in the car, but the moment you're out of the car, you're wearing a face mask in every interaction that you are in. And so it's a new habit and it's a consistent one. That's where we've got a difficulty with face masks. Flora, does that go some way to explain it?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. I think what I was also thinking though is this idea of confidence. A lot of the visitors, the volunteers, even some of the staff, when they're feeling very confident, find that it does make them quite complacent in terms of, you know, perhaps, oh, actually, maybe COVID's not as big a thing as we think it is. So actually, I don't need to clean that surface. And actually, when no one's looking, I'll take my face mask off and get close to
Okay.
them. That's so, yeah. I find it hard to kind of deal with that aspect of confidence.
If I can just flick this up, I think it's about communication, how we're communicating it. That I think it sort of comes under this old heading of health and safety. I do a lot of consultancy around health and safety. If the organisation puts health and safety in everything they do, in all their procedures, it becomes the norm, and no one ever will say, oh, it's a bit of health and safety. No one will ever speak of it in a derogatory term, because it's the way we do it around here. Because the company means it, all the stuff is in place, there's a consistent message that if you have to wear safety shoes, someone measures that. If you have to wear certain garments, it's measured. You know, all the processes are checked. You know, even in a gallery, how is the glass cleaned? Who has access to the step ladders? All the security measures. No one is complacent about that stuff. So we need to use the same communication style in a manner of speaking when we're talking about COVID. It's a health and safety issue. It is a risk. We manage fire even though we cannot see that risk. We have fire doors in the hope we'll never use it. We have a fire alarm that we test on a monthly or weekly basis. We hope we never use it. We could use the same thread when we're talking about COVID. We hope we don't need the mask, but we still got it in the same way as we've got a fire alarm.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe kind of going over the training and everything on a regular basis so that it does become the norm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of you may have toolbox chats, conversations that you have, briefings before the day starts, because we've got 3 groups coming in, one's at this time highlighting this. You will have had that kind of briefing, and if not, what's stopping you now? Having a team briefing today, perhaps picking up something that was in the news today about the difference in face masks, the fact that somebody's found a cure for this. Make it part of the topic of the day so that they are informed, because confidence without substance is ego. If we go back to the model, true confidence comes from capability, knowledge, understanding. So if we as team leaders, managers brief that knowledge and understanding, so the lack of confidence might come across as complacency, where actually, no, they're not feeling comfortable. So how do we right, let's talk about that issue today. They may be feeling uncomfortable because their children have gone back to school and they don't know what the procedures are at school. Go back a step and reassure their comfort. If they then undermine your key message, how do you manage anyone who's undermining health and safety, and use the same strategy? Because if you're not managing the undermining of health and safety, then we're on a hiding to nothing anyway. So I'm not suggesting necessarily it's a disciplinary procedure, but you would manage that misconduct. If they didn't wear the safety procedures, if they weren't wearing PPE, if they didn't wash their hands before making a sandwich, if they didn't manage the colour boards in your sandwich maker, they didn't manage all of that, you would be on it. So if you've got new procedures with regard to COVID, we need to be on it, because they need to know it matters. They need to know they matter. Martin, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, before anyone came in, I know, as we all know, that part of, to make your workplace COVID secure is to have that consultation with the staff. Yeah. But what we tried to head that off at the beginning by, when we sent out the documents and said what we wanted to do, we said, look, does anyone have any comments? Yeah. Is anyone unhappy with any of the points? And when they said we got some feedback, we changed some of the things, and some things we said we'd have to, say, this is what it is, unfortunately. But actually that consultation really helped us, and everyone signed a thing to say we are happy to come back to the workplace, which then helped us later on in that, if there were issues with the staff.
Yeah. Or is it about going back to that confidence slide, what do you need to feel comfortable coming back to work? Give it a slight nuance. What do you need from the team? What do you need in? And as I say, it may, just be the reassurance that actually the company's thought of it properly. Because unfortunately, going back to something Sarah said about bad news spreading faster than good news, there are many examples in the press about companies that haven't done it right. There's a rave here, there's 600 people in that pub there, that one's being closed down. There aren't best practice and good examples out in the press. So they may fear, both internal and external customers, that actually we're not doing it as well as we should be. And actually you've got lots of things to be proud of, whether it's asking those questions, what do you need to know before you come back to work? How can we reassure you? And ask those questions. Ask those questions. Think about, how are the schools communicating with you? Those of you who are parents, how are the schools communicating with you about their procedures and practices? And can we learn from that and flick it round and think, right, how do we need to share that information with our staff so that they feel comfortable, because that will then flick round and help our visitors. It's just such a new world. Sorry, Sarah, go on.
I was just going to say, I think Claire Griffin had something she'd like to weigh in with as well.
Oh, yes, please.
I was just going to say a couple of things. I think we found that, reinforcing what you were saying about the kind of being a behaviour that we're learning. So in the early days, we had our shop open to start with when we were allowed to, and we did have some problems with people turning up without masks, or kind of resolutely ignoring the staff and trying to avoid them as they went past. And that caused a bit of worry when it changed for the museums, but actually we've had very few problems since we reopened the museum. A couple of times people have come through the door with the mask on and then you've noticed they've taken them off, so you've had to speak to them, but very few. I think people are so into the habit now, it is becoming more normal. And then the other thing I was going to say is, I don't know if people saw, but Alva did some research prior to kind of main reopening and have continued to do it with visitors. And the kind of biggest thing that came back from that was that people trusted the organisations they were coming to visit, but they didn't trust their fellow visitors. So they were, they were most worried about what other people would be doing. They completely trusted the organisation to have put all the measures in place, but they didn't trust their fellow visitors to behave in the way they should. But what they needed from organisations was the people within that organisation to reinforce the rules. So they were really looking to somebody to reinforce. And I think that's what we've made it really clear all the way through to staff, that we need to role model behaviour.
That's it.
And we need to have the confidence to talk to people, because otherwise we're going to lose these visitors. So, you know, for us, our visitor services team is volunteer led. So, you know, we had to do a lot of work with our volunteers to make sure they felt comfortable. So I needed all the staff on board to help make the volunteers feel comfortable, and then need the volunteers on board to make the visitors feel comfortable. And everybody needs to feel comfortable saying to somebody, okay, these are the rules and this is what you need to do. So yeah,
I think that's very valid. I mean, coming back on, there's a piece about the flight that came back from Greece where the crew did not manage the fact that all the passengers on the aeroplane weren't wearing masks. 16 have since been diagnosed with having COVID, and the whole flight is supposed to self-isolate. Now that's the press view, but you just wonder how many flights have come back successfully with everyone behaving, and is it, you know, and how much is it the responsibility of the flight attendants, crew, to actually manage people on board the plane? And you're right, Claire, it's, as a visitor, I may trust the host organisation, but I'm also looking to others to be socially responsible. And I don't think we've quite got there yet. So do we have the language, hence this whole piece around communication, do we have this language that enables our colleagues to step in? Because messages can be misunderstood. It is very challenging because we perhaps don't like the new habit, and maybe there is a legitimate reason why I'm not wearing a mask, but we don't have a tool yet for that to be a wristband or a badge so that I don't have to challenge them. So we need to think carefully about all those messages. Got lots of extra people, Sarah, on that list.
I was just going to say, we've had a question that sparked all sorts of interesting discussions in the chat about how to build social distancing into your visitor offer, because Celia was saying that she'd been to the Tate and the social distancing wasn't really going on, and I'm wondering if you had any suggestions or ideas.
Well, let me bring up the next slide, which I think may generate some discussion and answers around that. Thank you, Sarah. So, barriers to effective communication. We think we might be communicating, but there's something stopping. And I think this next one is one we need to consider. We may have put up signage or put down signage where social distancing is concerned, but it's invisible. By that I mean, we've chosen the wrong place for it. It's in the wrong location. It's the wrong colour. I go back to health and safety. In health and safety language, blue is mandatory, red is stop, green is safe, yellow is caution. So does your signage, especially related to any COVID message, use the same colour coding? Because if it is mandatory for me to socially distance, but your signage is in green, I'm getting a mixed message, because the colour says it's safe, but you want me to stand 2 metres away from the person in front. So it becomes invisible then. It becomes blurred into the background, because whilst we may, I mean, I'm, as you know, a very strong advocate of health and safety, there's a lot we can learn by its coding. And if we use the same coding, that signage might be more visible. the position of it. If it's on the wall, if you think about access, a sign located, I think the broad brush is 2.5 to 4 feet on the wall, where you might find a light switch, for instance. Light switches are usually between 2 foot and 4 foot up the wall for a reason, because that's where our hands are. So if the location of wall signage is broadly in that span, it might be more visible because it's in my eyesight. Is it in the right font? Is it in the right script? If it's all in capital letters, it's shouting at me. Why, as a visitor, should I be shouted at? A bit like texting. So there's a huge amount that I could go into with some of the ways we can look at this. So if you want more information, I'm happy to share. But do an audit of your signage, especially if it's related to health and safety and COVID, and see whether it's matching back to health and safety coding, and see whether it's matching back to access requirements in terms of font and colour. And you may find that is a simple fix, because it's just a matter of reprinting it, re-laminating it and putting it back where it needs to be. We may have also started to use jargon and slang. Jargon, i.e. the technical language, that's fine. Slang, the sloppy language, but we haven't used simple language to explain what we want. More about this in a moment, but the use of PPE or face coverings, that, you know, whilst we have become accustomed, we may not yet feel comfortable having a face covering. Our visitors may be the same, and is this causing an impact on the way we come across? And as I say, more about options in terms of solutions in just a moment. Perspex shielding, how is that working for us? You know, if you've got perspex shielding around your till points or cash points, and there may be others. Any other barriers that people are aware of under these circumstances that we need to consider? Anyone got any comments on this? Not seeing anything cropping up. Anything cropping up, Sarah?
Not that I can
Oh,
see.
yeah.
Oh, is that Celia?
Celia, thoughts?
One of the things I was thinking about is people feeling awkward, because when I was at the Tate and people weren't socially distancing, there wasn't anything being said, and I think maybe there's that awkwardness of approaching people, of having the right phrases, say, well, you know, excuse me, would you mind just thinking a little bit about where you're standing, and giving, as you say, again, the confidence for your staff or your volunteers to be able to say that.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, Celia, it is about the language, so I'll pick that up in just a moment. But it is remembering that that's the word we want to use. Please remember. We're not telling them off, don't do that. We are reminding them, because it isn't yet common practice. We don't need to remind people to drive on the left-hand side. No?
I think the
You
other
might
thing that
need to be reminded if we're in Europe to drive on the right-hand side. Sorry, Sarah, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, I think some of the other things that sometimes crop up for museums specifically are things around conservation and signage. And we're quite used to, as a sector, telling people, do you really want to touch that? Is that a good idea? So I think maybe tapping into the things they already do is a good idea, because you're already comfortable saying, you can't take pictures in that gallery, I'm really sorry. So maybe there's a way of kind of getting them to think in the same way for this.
But equally, having done some work with a major gallery in Greenwich, what most visitors found confusing was they could go into some parts of the collection and take photographs and go into other parts of the collection and not. So again, not a consistent message. Now, if you are a technician, a curator, there may be very, very clear reasons in your head as to why this is the case. But we all go round with a camera in our pockets. So I am not a curator, I'm not a historian. I do not understand why, if I go into that gallery, it's okay, and that gallery, it's not. Now, I'm not suggesting all of a sudden you've got to share all the big history, But if there isn't an explanation underneath it, as a member of staff, I don't know how to support that rule because I don't know how to communicate it. Is it about the flashlight having impact on the canvas, on the clothing, on the, I don't, if that in your team briefings, if you're in your instruction and training, I don't have the credibility because I haven't been informed as to why there is a difference. How can I put that across with confidence and credibility to the visitors? Because it hasn't made sense to me.
It's that
Pardon?
communication line between,
Yes.
Between your curators and your front of house for those reasonings
Yeah.
to be made clear,
Yeah.
to give your front of house credibility. And it's something
Absolutely.
I see a lot in the big museums where the front of house are very disconnected from the back of house,
Yeah.
and it can be a real problem getting sort of that conservation message through. But I suppose it's exactly the same with this. The safety message, which comes from probably a head of service,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily get through to your front of house.
Yeah, and I think it's also about reinforcing, gently reminding, finding out where the sticking points, and learning, constantly looking at and thinking, right, let's not go and spend a huge amount of money with a print company to print off our signage. Okay? It's fair enough to use a colour printer and laminate it. It's not expensive. And then, okay, it's a bit tacky if you are a high-class museum, but for the first few weeks with a bit of blue tack, let's make sure it's in the right place, giving the right message. Let's audit it. Let's get the staff involved. Does that message help or hinder? Because this same gallery I was working with, there was a change in direction and they withdrew all the signage. So this was directional signage as well. This is the way to go to this gallery. This is the way to, all of that was withdrawn, excuse me, with the understanding that the staff would be the signpost, would be the info. Well, I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to go in a collection and find my own way round because actually I want to go and see that piece in that room, but I don't know, so on. So I'm having a rant here, excuse me. Let me breathe. Involve your staff in this effective communication. Ask them what is or is not working. What have they seen when they went into Tesco's? What worked for them when they were reminded? And it's about how did they feel when someone told them not to do something or don't do this? Actually, we want to say, please, would you do this? May I remind you that? Please remember that. And where is the chain of that information starting? If you have particular rules, is it on your website? So that as a member of staff, you could train me and then say, oh, and if you need to remember, go and have a look at our website because all the information is on that. Expectations. What is your promise? Or is it about, in this gallery, you may take lots of photographs and touch anything you like because you're not allowed to anywhere else in the gallery. Wonderful. Take your kids there first, touch everything, take loads of photographs, then go to the other bits. Are you making it easy for your visitors to comply? So key elements. These are the things we're highlighting in the 30 minutes or so we've got left. It's huge, this communication piece. We could be talking for months and not covered a huge amount, but I wanted to highlight this first impression piece, and I'm sure you're very, very aware of it. So these are the highlights of things that I think need to be focused on in the current circumstances. First impressions can be hugely influenced. How long does it take? Show me with your hands how long it takes to create a first impression. Yeah. It's potentially only one hand, ladies and gentlemen. And if we created a bad impression in those first 5 seconds, by 30, that is embedded. So is the first impression created from the website, the brochure, the entrance, the staff? Is it the environment where you work? Is it clean and tidy? Is it well signposted? Does it, litter? Don't get me started on litter. Personal presentation. Do the staff look ready to work? If they are wearing face coverings because that is your decision, is there a consistency to the way they look? Is it worth investing in some that are perhaps logoed with your brand? First impressions are also about your behaviours and how you role model to the staff, how the staff behave. Do they look comfortable? They might not yet be confident. Do they look comfortable? and how you sound and what you say. So we're going to just emphasize a few of those elements. So in the first instance, how do we respond, especially in that first impression point of view? What does the customer or visitor see? And that could be body language, signage, colour. Hear, that could be voice, sounds, music. Feel, empathy, warmth, smells. Revisit your galleries with a new view. Get some of your staff, if you have been closed for a while, perhaps have a soft opening and get your staff to revisit your property and your galleries and let them re-experience what it is you have to offer in terms of seeing, hearing and feeling. Are they noticing things that perhaps weren't visible before? Because it's really, really crucial that in opening, Martin mentioned bang for buck, yeah, making sure that we've thought about, right, what do they think they're getting for their visit, whether that's time or money? What have we said? Is it reinforced? First impression, really, really powerful. One of the most important things we need to do as individuals is acknowledge other people. Because the opposite of acknowledge is ignore. So what are the first three things we do as human beings to acknowledge other people? Can anyone suggest what those three things are, please, to acknowledge another person? Perhaps put it in the chat box or throw it up. What do we think the first three things are? Yes, Celia, what do you think they are?
Eye contact, smile, and kind of acknowledge someone verbally.
Take the first two. We haven't got to verbal yet. There's something else we do naturally as human beings between eye contact and smile. There's one in the middle. Any ideas? Ironically, most of you are doing it, as I have to flick down my little delegate photographs and profiles here. You're doing it all the time. Your head moves.
Yeah.
So an acknowledgement is eye contact first. I see you. I see you as an individual. My head then moves. It's a nod or it's a pleased or it's on the side. And then my face responds in a smile or a grin. We still need to do that even if we're wearing a face mask. And that is one of the most powerful things we can be encouraging our staff to do. If we have the barrier, so to speak, of face covering, we need to actively encourage greater acknowledgement of everyone, and that's internally and externally, because otherwise you may have people that are not using their eye contact wisely and then becoming very internal, and then a visitor feels ignored because they haven't been acknowledged. Whether there's conversation whereby in a training session I may seem quite gregarious and very chatty, when I go to a museum and gallery, I really don't need the steward to tell me what's going on. I will approach them if I need additional information. I'm a self-sufficient visitor to galleries and museums. So I still need to have been noticed. I don't need the full chapter and verse about what's going on. So our colleagues need to understand that this is really reassuring to acknowledge other people, that facial expressions will still be witnessed even if they're wearing a face covering. And then of course the gestures, the way we use our hands, the way we stand, do we look switched on, do we look ready to work, do we look comfortable? Please go back to that as a measure. Do people look comfortable? Confidence will come. Confidence will come, but do they look like they want to be here? Because that will be the reassuring element that our visitors then go by. The staff look comfortable, therefore I will trust that. I think the other thing to consider, bearing in mind body language is about 55% of how we come across. We also need to think about our voice, especially when we're wearing a face covering. So there are Key elements: how you use your voice has a considerable influence on how your words are interpreted. And this is, again, a huge subject. So I said to Sandra that I would share the slides, I would type them up and share them. But how many words per minute we speak? It's very tempting now, thinking, right, got 20 minutes left, got lots to say, I speed up. Actually, with Zoom, slow down. It helps. Deeper the voice, the clearer it comes across. Pronunciation is really important. And to help with this, it's really important that perhaps the two key features we need to adapt when we're wearing face covering is our speed, our pace, and our volume. On Zoom, I tend to slow down a little bit and speak up a little bit to overcome microphones, muffling, and so on. Wearing a face mask, that could be a simple technique you suggest to your colleagues. The other stuff may come along with practice, but just slow down a little bit and speak up a little bit so that they've got something practical to do to overcome what might be a real barrier in terms of face covering. Making sure that the comfort level comes across in their voice. These are just snippets, ladies and gentlemen, because we need to also think that actually a smile really helps. A true smile affects your eyes, which is why eye contact has to come first. Instructing your staff to walk around with a smile on their face is inappropriate. It's just not natural. Our smile is as a response to something. Therefore, as we've said, eye contact, nod, smile, and that will still be noticed even when we're wearing a face mask. So actively encourage your staff to physically be present and facially be present. What questions do you have on those two elements before we move on? When I considered this slide, do bear in mind a lot of this is about spoken word, but written word. So go back to your signage, your notices, your instructions to your colleagues, but also the verbal instructions on the day, going back to that point about interceding when a visitor perhaps isn't behaving as you would like. Please remember the courteous phrases. We know this instinctively from a customer service point of view, but I'm sure if you're telling someone for the 50th time about social distancing, we might forget the pleases and thank yous. Please remember the pleases and thank yous. If you're doing signage about what you need me to do, short active sentence. Please remember to wear a mask. Short, active. If it starts with the don't, that is not an action. So use that as a code. If your instruction is an action that you want, you're on the right track. If it is an action you don't want, that is not short active. Specifically, is it 2 meters? Is it 1 meter? Is the gallery able to accept 30 visitors at one time? Share that number. Is it specific? We are managing social distancing in this gallery, therefore the maximum visitors at any one time are 15. Okay? That then enables the staff to step in if number 16, 17 wants to come in to say exactly the same as the signage. We are managing social distancing in this gallery. I will allow you access as soon as 2 other visitors have left. I do know that such and such a gallery is undernumbered at the moment if you would like to go there next. It empowers the staff to have the right conversation. Anything unfamiliar, that goes back to your normal criteria, collating, the jargon. If you are using specific terms, is it explained and do the staff know what it truly means? Positive language about what we can do, what I will do. If you know the person's name because they're a regular or a member, lovely. Keeping to the point. The visitors will let you know if they need more stuff. But if we as guides in this can keep to the point, then the conversation will be more fluid. And what I found with the work I did with this other visitor attraction was the fact that where a lot of people in customer service are there because they like people or like the attraction that they're working with, one of the demands on them at the moment is to actually be more assertive. We don't want them to manage situations aggressively. That's never been a good technique with customer service. But going back to a couple of the comments, equally, being passive about this and ignoring stuff isn't going to work, because we need to set the tone as staff, as leaders, for our staff to then follow our lead, and then it translates to our visitors. So we need to listen to what our customers are saying. I didn't know that. Okay, I will check that. Asking open questions. What can we do for you? How can I help? Thinking about our voice, thinking about being calm and confident, because if your staff are calm and confident, your visitors are more likely to be so too. Maintaining that eye contact is a very human trait. Open gestures, because if they're standing like this feeling protective, then perhaps we're giving out the wrong message. And we're looking for solutions. So if the gallery is full, what could they do? Could they go for a coffee and then come back? Is there another part of the collection that hasn't got as many occupants in? Who's managing the floor? I was away last week, and although it's a restaurant example, we waited an hour and 15 minutes for our main course. And I would suggest it was because there wasn't a manager managing the space, looking to find solutions for pinch points. They were involved in what was going on. So for the time being, have you got someone that operates in what I would call a duty manager capacity? Can manage the floors, see what's going on, see who's struggling, see where the pinch points are. You might not have a particularly large collection, but is there someone who's got that roving brief that can be assertive and talk and walk around the collection, keeping an eye on staff, be the backup if needed, be the touch point if they need that reassurance? That may be part of your soft opening, that you've got just one or two extra people around to be that reassuring extra if the need arises. We need the customer, the visitor, to believe in you, and having that extra member of staff might just give them that extra reassurance. One last element which may be useful if you do need to intercede because you have got a visitor who isn't doing as requested. This is quite a simple way of having a conversation with them, and I call it carer, because each of those initials stand for something, and you could build this into a little coaching session with your staff or your duty management or your management. But the second R is in brackets for a reason. So as a visitor, I'm not expecting you to come and talk to me. I'll come to you if I need anything. So if you are having to step in because that visitor isn't managing their social distancing, has taken their mask off and not remembered to put it back on again, is about to touch a part of your collection which you'd rather not, any of those things, go and talk to them. Acknowledge them, have a conversation. They're not expecting you to talk to them. So connect. Verbally acknowledge the situation. So I can see you've got a face mask with you. I can see you've got in your camera ready. What is it that you are talking about? What's the experience that you're talking about, and acknowledge it. And what is it you want them to do? What is the solution? Please, would you put your camera away? May I ask you to put your mask back on? What is it you want them to do? Remembering we're talking about short, active sentence. And then empathize. Thank you very much indeed for your support. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your compliance. What is it you want? You know, a nice little empathy segment. What do you think the other R is? Because that's in brackets for a reason. Any ideas? Any guesses? Putting you on the spot. What do you think the other R stands for? Any ideas? Celia, what do you think the other R stands for?
Reassure?
It could be, actually, and I might change it to say reassure, but far too frequently we talk about the reason. For COVID, you've got to do this. The prompt here is, it's the last thing you say if indeed you need to say it, which is why it's in brackets for a reason. Having done a lot of work around health and safety, it sets my teeth on edge when someone starts a conversation with the health and safety, you're not allowed to do that. They've started with the excuse, with the reason, and the whole tenet of the conversation goes downhill because I now feel told off. So you can use this as a coaching session, you can use this for your duty managers. If there is a reason for conservation, for health and safety, for COVID, for social distancing, that's great, but encourage staff to leave it, because actually what we're reminding them is the behaviour we want, not the excuse or reason. Yet you could also, as Celia said, put reassurance in there and reassure them that this is a good thing to do. But it's just emphasising that if there is a reason for why the staff have stepped in to have that conversation with the visitor, it's not the first thing out of their mouth. It starts the conversation off on an empathetic and assertive tone rather than an aggressive one. So what we intended to cover during this session was to revisit how we anticipate meets and needs as required for our visitors, thinking about our websites, all our collateral, and making sure that the promises we're making are clear and we are upfront if something isn't accessible at the moment. We're making it very clear and our staff are brought into that. We've talked about a few skills and tips to create that positive impression, whether it's about your signage, PPE for your staff, etc. And a few communication skills, which may be about short active sentences, courtesy, and using the word remember as part of our coding and thinking about our signage. Hopefully for each of you, you found some meaningful outcomes for each of those topics. And I'll just leave it now to ask you if you have any questions, or what questions do you have?
There's a question here from Celia. How has everyone dealt with interactives? Are you making them accessible?
In terms of what's on the interactive, or from a safety point of view, Celia?
From a safety point of view, in terms of whether a lot of people at my site were saying, well, we can't have any hands-on things at all, but I'm wondering whether we can use our kind of simple interactives, which you can have hand sanitizer by, and I just wondered what other people's approaches have been to that.
I'll have to think, but is there anyone else who's got some good ideas and best practice that they can share?
For us, we've kind of done a mixture of things. So some we've swapped out, and we've gone for, I'm trying to think of a good example, but so we're looking at kind of using some spaces with interactives, but it's things you can take away. So if they're doing activity sheets or things, you know, even pencils, which we would normally probably have and then get in return, we're giving them to people and saying, you know, you take them if you want. When I was looking, the advice kind of seemed to be of kind of a mixture of things, of taking away touch points where you can, and if not, and if you want to try it, then it's making sure you've got hand sanitizer and really good cleaning practices in place. So
some museums, sorry Claire, some museums have done backpacks for kids that they can quarantine for 3 days. So the kid takes them out and then you keep it away from the public and then it can go out again, which has been quite good. And anecdotally from other sites I've been to, a lot of sites are using sort of hand sanitizer and antibacterial sprays next to things, and you kind of clean them yourself almost. I thought that was quite good.
Couple of thoughts just to think about. Sanitizer is brilliant. Please double check you're using the right one. In terms of, it needs to have an alcohol content of over 60%. Also, I've been some places where I'm convinced it's been diluted, so it will go further. It's not very reassuring. So double check. Is it worth having it in a branded bottle, so that it reassures the visitor too, that they know exactly what they're putting on their hands. And it's also making sure that they're using it properly, that it's not a simple squirt and it falls on the floor because it's so liquid, that they are actually using it. Gloves are another way to go.
Flora,
Sorry?
yeah, I was just going to say. I was just going to say, Flora's just mentioned gloves.
Yeah, yeah. If it's a big artifact which in itself cannot be sanitized afterwards, is it about wearing gloves so that they can get involved? And yes, there is a barrier then to them feeling the texture, but it's another option. Also, if it's a keypad, is there some way of putting something like cling film over the top so that the keypad doesn't get dirty, doesn't get touched? It's cling film, and then that is removed and you put another sheet of cling film on top so that the keypad itself is not ever touched. And using cling film or something similar on those other things where it cannot be cleaned, but you've got a fresh surface each time. Anybody got any other ideas? Now, I was thinking about a tower bridge where you've got the glass in the floor. It has a protective surface, and it is changed on a regular basis because of the scuff marks from the shoes, which protects the glass underneath from getting scratched. And for some reason that came to mind, and I thought, right, what's a keyboard equivalent? Well, that'll be cling film. Maybe. Any other ideas from people? Okay. What other questions do you have?
One thing that I've one thing I found difficult to monitor is if a volunteer, for example, is about to do something or is in the process of doing something that you know they shouldn't. So for example, yesterday, one of the volunteers was touching the books without gloves in the library, and we have a little library, and as long as people wear gloves, then it allows us to still maintain and use it. And yeah, I just found it very tricky because I didn't know how to talk to her with the visitor there as well, but I could see she was about to give it to him as well, and I was like, oh gosh. So I actually walked away from the situation and then later told her, like, please make sure you wear gloves, and she's like, yeah. But then I noticed it happens again, so I found that situation really tricky.
There's a couple of things there. If that was a health and safety issue, because COVID is, but let's just go back a step. If that was a health and safety issue, i.e. somebody's safety was just in jeopardy, not having I couldn't see who was asking that question, but we would step in, wouldn't we? Excuse me, may I offer you these gloves? So you'd step in straight away to find the remedy. But you do it gently. May I remind you need these? May I give you these? And you provide the solution. Then afterwards, take the member of staff on one side and then go perhaps back through carer, but maybe you need to explain to them the reason. Because, for instance, I was watching a programme the other day where this beautiful book was put out, and they were touching the page. This wasn't a COVID situation, but they were touching the pages directly. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, the grease on that person's hands would therefore transfer to that beautiful artifact. And I couldn't understand why they weren't wearing gloves. But if, as a member of staff, I don't understand the reason, i.e. the sanitizer is now on that book, or the grease from my hands is now infecting that book. So that would be the way of looking at it. The intermission needs to happen straight away. Because if it's that urgent, you would step in. If that person's life was in jeopardy, you would step in and deal with it. If we don't, the member of staff thinks, well, it can't have been that serious because you didn't stop me.
Yeah.
So it is a tricky one. So it's that factor, but it's also the factor that if she's going, yes, it's probably because she's not credible in understanding the reason. Therefore, she does not know how to explain it to the visitor. Because telling people to wear gloves without understanding the reason behind, some people will not take that. What you need me to do, I need to explain. I better understand when I'm explained why. Does that make sense?
No, that's really good, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts or questions? I'm mindful that we're right on time, so I don't want to keep people hanging on. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you found the time useful. Throughout the Go on.
Can I just dive in and say we will be sending you out a survey after this training is finished. If you can fill that out, we'd be very, very grateful, because it helps us make the case to Arts Council so that we can do more free training like this. So make sure you fill your survey out. And Jo, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, just to thank everybody and to say that I'm happy to receive emails if there's more specific questions that perhaps you didn't feel appropriate to ask during the session, and I'll help as best I can. But it's been a real pleasure working with you, and I wish you the best of luck as you work through the next period of time with COVID and everything else. Good luck.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jo. It's been very good. And thank you for joining us, everybody else. Apologies if it's difficult logging on. Thank you. Take care of yourselves.
I will stay online if anyone wants to pause and ask a question as everyone dissipates.
Oh, no, no, don't worry. Okay, bye.
Celia, have you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you had any advice on managing upwards. If your managers are not really on the same page as you with all the kind of the advice that you're giving on kind of how to bring them round, or things that you could point them towards that would kind of back up what you've been saying, Jo.
Okay. What specifically are they struggling with? Can you give me an example?
It's early days for it, because our site has not been reopened yet, but I think it'll be about provision of things such as everyone having their own face masks or visors, or putting more information out. So things that may cost some money, you know, so like we've got 30-40 volunteers, and I kind of feel that they should all have, you know, some kind of protection on their faces, or and having things like the interactives, and having resources like the gloves or extra hand sanitizer points. So it's early days because I don't know if these problems are going to be there. It's just from my past experience. So
I'm trying to be proactive.
Yes.
Well, I could have a comment on this as well once you finish, Jo.
Okay, thank you. I would ask if it was how supportive they are of health and safety in general, because every organisation is having to revisit their risk assessments, their general ones and their specific ones, to see what, if anything, needs to be updated to meet the requirements of COVID. So you may or may not have had to do a risk assessment that resulted in PPE, but you now have. And again, I'd go back to that carer. You don't necessarily want to say, for health and safety, your management, for health and safety, I've got to do this. But it may be that in the context of health and safety and managing the risk, to enable us to reopen with confidence and for our visitors to feel confident when they cross the threshold, we've revisited these risk assessments and they have identified 2 or 3 solutions that we can put in place to encourage that footfall. So you're using all that positive language to reinforce the fact that we want to reassure our visitors. It will encourage footfall. Best practice, maybe you come up with 2 or 3 examples of best practice where other organisations have done it, or good practice. There is a difference. Best practice you need to match. Good practice is a good idea. So 1 or 2 of each. So you can say, you know, our competitors or other attractions are doing this and this. So reinforcing the idea of where your solutions have come from. But ultimately they too may be risk adverse, and they are perhaps not feeling confident either, and it's coming across in this manner, and that's what you're needing to confront. Michael, what were you, Martin, I beg your pardon, what were you going to add into that comment?
So one of the points was exactly what you've just raised there. What we did was we contacted other organisations that we kind of worked with in the past and said, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I've always found that's quite, you know, if you just say that to luckily in our case, we've got a fantastic line manager who is in fact more health and safety than possibly I am as well. But you know, it's a lot easier to say to them, you know, we're doing this because, you know, we found talking to this organisation and this organisation, you know, so there's a consensus already built in there.
Yeah.
The other thing is the how to make your workplace COVID secure, both the HSE one and the government one. They're quite kind of directive in terms of what you can say, and then you know, and you can say it says in this document, it says in this document, and it's up to them to build the case why not. And then thirdly, you know, the risk assessment is your friend in that, you know, you're putting in there that this is the risk and this is what we're going to do. If they don't want to do something again, they would have to suggest something. But for the HSE one, if you're doing the it's kind of more centered towards the workers, but a lot of times it's the things that you have to do for the workers, like hand sanitisation and things like that. If you're already doing it for them, then it's a no-brainer that you then follow on for the staff. But that's what I found anyway.
Thank you, Celia. Martin, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, thank you. There was a couple
Thank
of
you,
hello everyone.
Hello.
This is Daisy here, and
Daisy.
I have a question. So I watched your speech, and it's about putting some posters and the signature, and also remind people about social distancing, and also put sanitizers. My question is, have you our expert here and also other friends think about having an online system? So I've known that three national museums in the UK, they already started to test indoor navigation through connecting to the signals of personal cell phones. So I want to know your opinion about using that technology to maintain the traffic flow inside the venues.
I would be cautious of making this too technical, that this is about human behaviour. If I'm out on the street, do I remember to stay 2 meters apart? If I'm on a bus, I think there is technology, but it may well be within the galleries. They are a small attraction and they don't have access to that technology, or there isn't the space, or their visitors don't have that technology. Personally, also, I'm also, so not just privately, professionally, but privately, if we as a country are struggling to manage track and trace because people will not share their data, and that is absolutely about people's safety, I'm not sure whether we will get the buy-in to use technology in this circumstance. It may be around the corner, but for the time being, I think there are other ways, other solutions. I don't know whether others have got a comment on that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sarah, did you have a comment on that?
No, just I was going to say it might be just a little bit too early for museums to look at doing that. Just because so many of the smaller ones don't have access to things like Wi-Fi, which makes it difficult to connect.
And I also think that, you know, if we're managing traffic, there are huge shopping centres like Blue Waters and that kind of thing, where actually if that process was going to be useful, it's there where actually I'm arriving and I'm looking after myself and I'm not expecting anyone to tell me which shop to go into next. Whereas in a gallery, you have got stewards and volunteers around to help with that monitoring of footfall. Whereas in a shopping centre, you haven't. So I would think if that technology is viable, that may be the bigger scene. And going back to Sarah's point, they've probably got the IT bandwidth to be able to manage it as well. Would be my initial thoughts.
How about there is a platform or a company of this kind to provide service? It's like we can equip the small museums with Wi-Fi and the necessary equipment, and also we can have many different museums in the UK. So it's kind of more cost effective.
I can't comment on that point, Daisy. I think it's down to Sarah and the museum to think about that as to whether this requires an IT solution. Sorry, Sarah, go on.
It'd have to come down to cost.
Yeah.
I think at the moment museums perhaps don't have the capital to invest in something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So without thinking about the cost part, so what's your opinion? Maybe we can get support from the government to make the technology ready, and so it will not cost the museums, but we are happy museums to manage things and also to generate new revenue stream.
It would have to be.
I'm not sure. Go on, Sarah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it'd have to be down to the individual museums to make a decision like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm conscious of time, Joe. How many more questions have we got? Is it just Martin and Celia?
Thank you.
Yeah. Happy, Celia, did you have something else you wanted to come back to?
No, I was just hanging in there because it's all quite interesting conversation. Thank you. It's been a really useful morning.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
I have no questions either. I was just listening as well.
Curious.
Thank you ever so much.
Very welcome, Martin. Thank you for your input. Really appreciate it. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.